Hello, let's talk a little bit about technology, strategy, models, and decision making, right? At the end of the day, technology, remember, is a part of your organization's strategy and decision making. It's not a back end operation because everything you think of right now is technology driven, and technology is being served to just about everyone, everywhere, from C level directors and CEOs and everybody right into the front line of operations. So let's talk about how that's done. This is Dr. Pratim Tata, and thank you for listening. So let's start with understanding the core part behind how we even look at decision making. A big part of decision making is, of course, is driven by financial elements, right? It has to be, remember, efficient and effective. It can't just be lower costs. It also has to solve a certain objective, right? Or move towards a certain objective, have a certain purpose. You can have things that are efficient but not effective. So, if you look at a general setup, this is, of course, from 20 years ago, but if you just look at the numbers right out here, it's quite interesting because what you find is that things such as ancillary benefits, for example, supplemental benefits, retirement benefits, health insurance, work-life paid leave, government mandated, you suddenly realize that a lot of it goes into a salary. So if you now start looking, and this has gone up dramatically. So nowadays, if you are to look at a salary of, suppose, a $100,000 salary, the cost, this is called a total cost of ownership, or TCO, right? So it's called TCO, total cost of ownership. It shows that $100,000 salary doesn't mean that the company's actually paying $100,000. They're actually investing in about $140,000 for an employee in the US. In China, it's of course much lower, and that's why even if you were to get $100,000 for an employee for the same company, a multinational based in China or in the US, you'd rather go for the Chinese employee even at $100,000 because your total cost of providing things like benefits and insurance and work-life vacations and so on and so forth add up to a much lower setup. Might actually be about 18 to 20% in China, beyond the cost of the general salary outlay. So that is when you start asking yourself, why not use technology to replace humans? And let's look at a case of call centers in India, right? So if you've ever watched a movie that shows call centers or seen a YouTube video, you'll find that call center operators are not subject matter experts in the device or the service that you're calling them about. They're reading off a screen, right? And these screens have a series of checklists which says, press this button, ask these questions, if this is the answer, then press. And this goes through basically a decision tree. If this is clicked and that is clicked, think of it as a very complicated flow chart that creates these call center help setups, because the person who's at a call center may have never even seen the product that you're calling about, let alone actually being proficient and being a master at it. So here suddenly you can ask yourself, suppose that call center worker is paid, let's say in Indian money, or not in Indian money, or Indian currency purchasing power parity, something in terms of $25,000 per year or $20,000 per year. And suppose the total cost of ownership, which is adding all the benefits and so forth, is another 20%, right? Say 20% of 25,000 is another $5,000, so altogether $30,000. So $30,000 per year for that employee, and that's oftentimes might not even include things like real estate costs, which is that you have to provide space for the employee to sit and work, right? Tech for the employee. Why not replace that with AI or some other kind of similar technology? That could work very nicely, but that might cost you altogether maybe $40,000 for each single user iteration. I'm just making up a number. It's going to cost way less. So suppose you've got a call center with 10 operatives, right? So that's altogether total cost of ownership $300,000. If you can get an AI that you could license out that would be trained in the product you're servicing or the service you're servicing, and you need to purchase the AI for, let's say, $10,000 per month at a licensing level. And you say, all right, so that's $120,000 total cost of ownership because you don't have the servers or anything. It's reading of the cloud, right? It's an agent that's been trained to work off the cloud. Then, instead of spending $300,000, why can't we simply spend $120,000? So this is what is truly happening right now. Therefore, questions arise, right? So why not? So companies always try to find patterns in terms of how do you manage a portfolio of assets? Various employees, patients, whoever you're talking about might have a total cost of ownership. Servicing that person, servicing in patient is a customer, a call center agent is a provider, right? So whether you're talking about a customer or a provider, everything comes with a cost. And why not therefore get into risk aversion by using technology rather than using the person, right? A person or a technology. Same thing you find is even with medicine. You're using AI nowadays. It's becoming a bigger trend as AIs are getting more and more sophisticated over time, to rather have a primary care physician be an AI or an AI be a primary care physician rather than human being, because the total cost of ownership might be very, very high. So, how do you go about with it? Firstly, do understand total cost of ownership, then start with a SWOT analysis, this is to understand both internal and external issues. What are the strengths and weaknesses which are internal? What are the opportunities and threats? And never look at it at a company level, because a company can have many different products and services, and each will have its own strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Here's an example. Suppose if you look at Tesla, you can't do a SWOT for Tesla because Tesla has everything from, cars like Roadsters and Model S Plaid to a very basic Model 3. They all have different market segments, and therefore their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats are very, very different. A Tesla S Plaid or a Tesla Roadster has very few competitors out in the market, or have very few competitors in the market. But a Model 3 has way more competitors in the market, including companies like BYD and Lucid, among many, many, many other companies, even the ones that are just coming into the market. So, understand SWOT at a product level within a company. In order to understand that, sometimes use things like Delphi-based brainstorming, which is basically an iterative brainstorming. You gather a set of experts first, ask them, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats for this particular product or service? Then let them answer like a secret ballot. Then pair them and ask them, now this is the whole set. Which one would you rank as being the top 5? And then after that, which one would you rank as the top 3? And go on until you pair them down into a nice set. The second thing after that is to do something like a root cause analysis. such as or called an Ishikawa diagram, to look at what are the key things you need to do in order to achieve the target or the objective, whether you want to reduce an issue or you want to increase sales or increase adoption or whatever it is. But what you're doing that for is to firstly understand what are the common sets of things that you can do in order to fix a lot of other things, and to also build better KPIs or key performance indicators for KSFs, key success factors, or critical success factors. Now, find the right critical success factors and their corresponding KPIs. Then run a pest analysis. A pest is basically, is it politically feasible? Is it economically feasible? Is it socially feasible? And is it technologically feasible? For a feasibility analysis. And then, of course, do a post-implementation. So you have to implement something. You can't wait. You can't have paralysis by analysis. So you have to implement something. But post-implementation, look at, this is what we wanted to achieve. This is what we've achieved. That's the gap. Use the gap sometimes, again, as a root cause or an Ishikawa model to say, why do you think we've had the gaps? Or even if you've outperformed, why do you think, what were the key things that we did to outperform? So you can go back in a very nice circle. So here's an example of a TCO model. So I'm just going to give you a quick, very simple example. So this is again for more like legacy systems. You have things like, suppose you want to purchase a technology, companies, what they'll do is they'll map it out, very much like an Excel spreadsheet. You'll have all of these things, all of these in different rows. And then you'll split it up in terms of quarter one or year one, whichever way you want to calculate it, quarter two or year two, and then you'll say cost of network hardware and software. What's the cost of quarter one? Are there other maintenance costs, servers, right? Infrastructure, flow space, and you'll start filling them. Once you do that, so similarly, if you're talking about a person, you'll now say, all right, who are the people and how much do they cost us per year? And this is the total cost. And then you'll determine both direct costs and indirect costs of a product, service, system, or even a person, right? So these are oftentimes indirect costs, right? And then, of course, these are also, a lot of these are indirect costs, and then a lot of these are direct costs. Then what you do is you do a net present value. So once you've got all numbers in there, so you can do a net present value, and simply put, all you're doing is a net present value. Basically means you're bringing everything, because time is money, right? Because at least at an inflation rate, so suppose a company has a 5% rate of return. So or in this case, assume that you were to just put the money into a bank that was giving you a 5% interest rate every year. Why would you then simply spend it on something that is giving you an amount lower than 5%? So what you do is, it's the very famous calculation, which I think you all know, is future value. So future value is, what is the value in the future? Is nothing but present value times 1 plus I to the power, and I is the interest rate, to the power n. N is basically the number of periods, a number of, so if it's every quarter, 4 quarters a year, n would be 4, right? If it's per year, and 3 years, n would be 3, right? 3 years at every quarter level, it would be 12, so 3 times 4 quarters. So then, to get present value, you immediately know, so PV is equal to, so if you just move things around a bit, straightforward calculus, you say it's nothing but the future value divided by 1 plus I right? And then to the power of n, right? So all you're doing is that. So it immediately tells you that that is how you can calculate the net present value. So what you'll do is for each, you'll then bring it back to present value, present value, present value, present value, and then add them together to get a net present value. So that's what you're doing. So you have to then look at what are the TCOs for any operation, for things like HR, for technology, facilities, innovative products, innovative services, among many different things. Next, let's go into the SWOT analysis. So, we've talked about it. Start with a Delphi-based brainstorming. Iterative. Get some experts, have them do it in bullets. Put all the things together. Now ask them, which one would you rate as a top 10, top 5? Next round, top 3. Next round, top 2. And so forth. So you're iteratively paring them down, and then you rank order for priority. That's your Delphi type brainstorming. And your SWOT, again, strengths and weaknesses are internal, opportunities and threats are external. So if you're looking at, let's suppose, SpaceX, right? What is the strength? Compared to a typical NASA liftoff, it costs about a fifth of what it used to cost. That's a strength. Great cost management. Another strength might be that it can actually reuse its boosters, which also adds to your cost lowering of costs, right? And it has very, very quick launch times. The weaknesses might very well be that, the company can have, a lot of failures with the latest and greatest tech that they're having. Any of these failures could really impact further operations. One small fault could create a lot of issues. A perfect example is think of what happened to Boeing once it's what's it called? I think 330 or something like that. Not 330. It's one of the Boeing planes that started catching or having a lot of things like doors suddenly opening and other malfunctions, software malfunctions. That could be weakness. That could really create a problem. That's when you remedy it or stop it. Then comes opportunities. That space exploration is becoming more and more popular, right? And of course, that is one reason why you can use it a lot. Plus, of course, the SpaceX also has Starlink satellites which it can deliver. So it's an own opportunity to create even cellular broadband networks in the sky. And then threats. These could be everything from competitors to regulations and so forth. Is space exploration going to become more popular? Is it becoming threatened? Are there other competitors that are vying? Is Blue Origins a threat? Is the European Space Agency a threat? Are the Russian Space Agency still a threat? Is China's coming up with a lot of new SpaceX type of companies. Would they become threats? So opportunities and threats are external, and strengths and weaknesses are internal. The best way to figure these out is through a Delphi-based brainstorming. Next, of course, is Ishikawa diagrams and extensions. So now what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out what is it that we're trying to achieve and how do we get there? What are the problems that we have and what might be some of the root causes behind the problem? So this is going to be your objective. So you might say, why do we have fewer patients at this hospital, right? Why is the hospital technology not working very well? Is it something to do with what kind of hospital policies that we have? Is it something to do with what type of providers we have? Who's the technology provider? Is it something to do with the type of patients that we're servicing, for which the technology might not be the best solution? Is it something to do with the processes and procedures? Or is it something to do with other things such as the plants and the equipment and so forth. Then you say, all right, what is the weight? So suppose you say, we've got 5 items. So rather than giving everybody a 20% weight, which is 20 times 5 is 100, you say, okay, policies I think are very important, so we're going to give it a 0.3 weight, so 30% weight. Providers maybe not that important, so we'll give it a 10% weight, right? 0.1. Patients, very important. Is it serving the right purpose, the right patient? Maybe give it a 30% weight, right? Maybe policies and procedures. So we've got 3, 3, 1, that's 70%. So this is maybe 20%, 0.2. And then this is 10% or 0.1, right? So you say, okay, so you've got 3, 3, 6, 6 and 2, 8, and 1 and 1, 2, 10. So now you can say, if, let's say, what are the policies that might be creating a lower adoption of a certain technology within the hospital or within the particular organization? And you could say, okay, what are the reasons why our policies don't seem to serve us very well? And you might say, oh, right, you know what? Maybe our policies are still based on practices in a pre-digital world, right? So you might say that it's very legacy, right? So let's say legacy, LEG. And then you might say, well, our policies don't seem to work because these policies are never built with new technologies in mind, right? So it's very dated. So you could say it's dated. So what you try to do is you try to figure out the problem with each of them and what contributes to each of these issues. And then now you can give them a percentage, right? So suppose you have these 2 issues, but you say how dated the policies are is 70% of the problem, and how legacy the systems are, and the policies based on old systems were is maybe 30% of the problem. Then what you do is you now say, okay, you go back and say, so you've got 30% issue with the policies, and the policy issues are created 30% by legacy systems and by dated policy formulation, 70%. Now you ask, what is the impact? So you might say the policy is creating bad policies, is wasting us technology investments of maybe $10,000 every year, right? So $10,000 every year. So you now immediately say, our impact from policy related issues is 3,000, which is 10,000 times 0.3. So you do that all together, and now you can have a total impact of all these policy issues, provider issues, patient issues, process issues, plant issues on the total issue at hand, which is why are we not being able to use the right technology at the hospital, and how much is it costing us? Similarly, when you go down here, you might say, okay, this one might say it typically, well, it might say, this is maybe has a certain dollar value impact. This one has a certain dollar value impact, and then you'll suddenly see that you'll start getting the issues deeper and deeper, from which you could start solving how to really formulate the KPIs. So that is very, very important. So finally, we get into the KSFs and CSFs and KPIs. So remember, KSFs, key success factors, or critical success factors. These are resources, initiatives, and support to ensure success as a manager in your organization. And part of the value network that you rely on is functional. And that enterprise area, you must always look at high performance, but you need to measure it. Measurements could be quantitative, right? Or you could come up with practical indicators, or they're market indicators, which could be quantitative, could even be anecdotal, could be directional. Is there a trend? Are there improvements? Is there a regression in place, which is going down, or is it progression? Actionable. Do you have proper implementations in place? What are they? How can you, if you can't measure something, it is well worth not having it, right? So, and then financial indicators, what are the agreed upon financial measures? So you can have everything from quantitative, how fast are we servicing a patient? How quickly can you enter the patient's data into the system? Among many different things. Then, of course, financial, is it saving us money? Directional, is the trend getting better and better as people are getting more and more accustomed to the software? Are there market? Are others doing it and other people doing it better? Among many different things, but you have to have KPIs. Then, of course, second last piece of the puzzle is doing a pest analysis. Looking at the feasibility of using that technology within the company. So is it politically feasible? Does the government support it? Is it working well? Right? For example, a perfect example is what's going on with drones. Why don't we see more and more drone deliveries in the air? Because, of course, maybe the FAA has a very regulated airspace, and there's a lot of backlash against drones invading our airspace, because of which it's not working. So government issues, regulation, social employment legislation, tax policy, in this case privacy issues, consumer protection, right? Political environment, of course, it changes. A good example is look at what's happening with crypto. A political change is making crypto adoption more and more popular. Then you've got economic, so political, economic, social, technological. Is it economically feasible? Is it the right part of the business cycle that we're in, right? If things are not going very well, if the economy is in recession, don't, because people might not even have money. Companies might not have enough interest in buying things because everybody's going through a very hard time. A current and projected economic growth, disposable income, which is, do you have money to buy it, right? Do you have enough money? Or if you can't sell something to somebody living hand to mouth, is globalization impacting you? Impact of technological or other changes in the economy and other likely changes, right? Likely impact and likely changes. Then comes socio-cultural. And there's a story I often tell where I was working with the Italian government, and one thing we learned was there are certain communities in northern Italian villages, for example, where even the best digital transformation app that could save people hours of time rather than doing handwritten things, waiting in line for hours and hours, getting one token after another at a post office, could be reduced to maybe 10 minutes. But people didn't want to use it because only to realize that the lifestyle and socio-cultural changes there were never thought of, which is people went to the post office for community. They didn't want to lose this whole idea of saying hello to other people. Even so, suddenly, a technology might be efficient but not socio-culturally effective. So should always look at that part. So population growth rate, age profile, population health, education, employment patterns, attitudes towards it, public opinions, social attitudes, social taboos, and of course, finally, look at the technological environment. Do we have the right technologies? Do we have the right people to serve the technologies, right? Do we have the perfect R&D? And then do we have technology transfers, right? Can we move this technology from one place to another? Can we learn from others? Could we work with others, among many different things? So this is all about feasibility, right? So I'm just going to quickly write it. So feasibility. So PEST is all about understanding if it's feasible or not. Finally, we move into gap analysis. What is gap analysis? Of course, we always think that this is where we want to be versus this is where we are, right? Whether we're talking about our own lives or we're talking about our companies. So if a company or organization doesn't make the best use of its current resources or forgoes investments in capital and technology, there's always a gap. But of course, even when you implement something, there might be a gap. You can use the technology and say, this technology was supposed to do this, but what is it actually doing? Is there a gap? So you can use the opportunities and strengths to assess your capacity utilization. So think of it. Market penetration and usage gap is nothing but what's the potential of the market versus existing usage. We thought that there'll be 10 million subscribers. We only have 6. Why? Why is there a 40% drop in what we thought we would have versus what is being used? The next one is implementation gap, which is how much did we expect that people companies would implement that technology versus what is the current implementation? And then ask, is there an issue with positioning? How we promote and set up our product? To which customer market are we looking at? Is the market and implementation gap because of positioning or because of a channel conflict? Channel conflict is when you use a channel to do something, right? But of course, that channel itself has a lot of powers. For example, car companies have a tough time selling cars directly to customers. Why? Because dealers within the channel have enormous power, right, to simply change things dramatically. So there's a channel conflict there. So keep that in mind. And then, of course, the final one is understanding a balanced scorecard. So it's oftentimes called a tableau de bord, right? And this mainly used for process improvement. Always ask yourself, how are we doing? How do we score ourselves? How is a financial scorecard? So in order to succeed financially, how should we appear to our stakeholders, right? So you can talk about every single thing, what are the initiatives, what are the objectives, what are the measures that we have? Again, goes back to KPIs, right? Root causes. In order to achieve our vision, how should we appear to our customers? In order to make our processes better, what do we need to do? Right? Internal business processes. And then, in order to constantly improve, what do we need to do? That all adds up to your technology, vision, and strategy, right? So, learning and growth, everything from culture, the company's culture, to employee training, business process is how you do things, right? How is the business running? What are the things we typically do? What is the workflow? And then the customer perspective, what do they want? What should their user experience be? And then financial, how does that all translate into a financial setup, right? How does it impact the bottom line? Thank you very much.